Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the organizers for setting this workshop online, although of course it would have been better to be gathered in Bath in this beautiful city, but let's try to make this experience online enjoyable still. So my talk will be about the analysis of gradient descent on wide two-layer ReLU neural networks. And this is a recap of several joint works with Francis Bach. So I will immediately start with the setting of my talk. So we consider the classical setting of supervised machine learning, where we consider a couple of random variables x and y, where x is the input, lives in R to the D, and D will be typically large. You can think of an image, and y is the output or the labels, and lives in R or just the set -1, 1 for classification tasks. So for instance, y could say whether an image contains a person or not. So our goal will be to build the function h, a predictor function, such that it predicts the correct label or output given an input. And we have to do that given only n IID samples from our random variables. And this set of samples will be called the training set. And we have n samples. So there are many ways to solve this task. But we will focus on wide two-layer ReLU neural networks. So this is a specific class of predictor, which has the following form. So for two-layer ReLU neural networks, we can write the predictor h as the sum of simple functions, which we'll call phi, which are parameterized by some weights wj. And here, m is the width of the hidden layer of the two-layer neural networks. So more precisely, phi is the composition of an affine form parameterized by weights A and B. B is the bias. A nonlinearity, which is here the maximum part between 0 and our affine form. And then output weight, which is called C. And so W is the parameters for each of these simple functions. It's A, B, C. It is in R to the D plus 2. And M, I recall that M is the width of the neural network. And in our work, we'll be mostly interested in the case where M is very large or even infinite. And in this situation, this prefactor 1 over M is needed to obtain a non-degenerate limit. So we could consider other type of prediction of nonlinearity in our work, but I will focus here on the ReLU case because it allows to fix ideas, and also it's because it's widely used in practice. But one property that is very important and which we'll use in our theoretical analysis is that phi is too homogeneous in W, in the parameter, which means that when we multiply the parameters by some scalar R, then the output will be multiplied by R to the squared, because both AB and C are multiplied by R, so we get R squared in the output. So this is one important property that we use. So now that we have defined our class of predictor, the goal of the learning algorithm will be to select all these weights, Wj, using the training data so as to reach a suitable prediction function. So to do that, a classical paradigm is empirical risk minimization, in which we use the training data we minimize some criterion that is observed on the training data, potentially with some regularization. So the loss function that we choose is a function that takes two inputs, the prediction that we make and the actual label associated to a training point, and output some loss. And we assume throughout this talk that is convex and smooth in its first variable, which is satisfied by, for instance, the square loss or the exponential or the logistic loss. And I will define these losses later in the talk. And with this loss, the empirical risk is this function that I will call FM, which takes as parameters, as inputs, all the parameters of the neural networks, and contains the empirical risk plus an optional regularization term, where lambda here is the strength of the regularization. And I will consider both the case where lambda equals 0, so the unregularized case, and the case where lambda is strictly larger than 0 in this talk. So here the regularization is the square of the norm of all the parameters in the neural network, and it's often called weight decay in this context. So this is the usual regularization that is used for neural networks. So the specificity of this function is that it is non-convex. So in fact, it is known that finding a minimizer, in particular in the regularized case, is a computationally hard problem. But in practice, it's often observed that gradient-based methods perform well or give satisfactory results on such functions. And so this is a fact that we will partly explain in this talk. And so we consider specifically the following training dynamics. We initialize the weights with IID sample from a distribution mu0. So this is a distribution on the space of parameters. If you remember, it's R to the d+2. And each of the units of our neural network will be initialized randomly. And we choose a specific probability measure on the space of parameters for our initialization, which has to have a finite second moment. So that's why I wrote this little 2 here. And this second moment condition is related to the true homogeneity of the function phi, and also of the true homogeneity of the regularization term when it is present. And given this initialization, we will decrease the objective using the gradient flow of the objective, which is just the continuous time version of gradient descent or stochastic gradient descent. So taking this continuous time point of view allows to gloss over some specificity related to time discretization and just have a clear qualitative picture of what's happening during the training dynamics with our gradient-based algorithm. So before I present the theory associated to this dynamic, I want us to watch together what it looks like when on a specific example. So here, this is the dynamics of training for a classification task where I have trained a 2-layer neural network on the unregularized logistic loss. So we have a classification task in 2 dimensions. Here, this is a space of predictor. We will see the decision boundary that will evolve in time. And we have 2 classes of pluses and minuses. And here, this will be the evolution in the space of parameters. So here, each of the dots will represent one of our neurons of our neural network. And in fact, in this animation, there are 200 of them. I plot, so here, the parameters W live in R to the d+2, which is R to the 4. So to obtain something that can be visualized, I plot instead the hidden weights multiplied by the absolute value of the output weight. So this clears out one redundancy, and this allows to visualize the dynamics. And then the color of the particle represents the sign of the output layer. And final detail is that the unit sphere is at infinity, because we will see later in this talk that for such dynamics, all the particles will escape to infinity. So I have applied the hyperbolic tangent to the radial scale to obtain something which is visually more pleasing. And so here is how this evolves. So I recall this is space of predictor, space of parameters. We see that all the particles evolve during our training dynamics. And little by little, we achieve smaller and smaller training performance. And in the end, we observe some remarkable facts. In particular, we see that the learned predictor has a few straight edges, so it's quite simple. And in the space of parameters, we see that although we had a lot of particles at initialization, they have collapsed into just a few groups. And at the bottom, we have some inactive neurons, which are the ones with a bias which was too small, so they remained inactive throughout the dynamics. So our goal in this talk will be to understand what is this predictor that has been learned by our neural network. And so we will focus on answering this question. And in particular, we want to understand its performance on the training set, on the test set, which means its prediction performance. So why, what are our motivations for that? So of course, it's important to understand 2-layer neural networks. We want to understand when they're powerful and the roles of the initialization, the choice of the loss, whether we have regularization or not, and for which type of data they can perform well or not. But more generally, I think that 2-layer neural networks are a very good test case to understand the phenomenon of representation learning via backpropagation or via a gradient-based algorithm. Because in deeper neural networks, it's often said that they perform well because they are able to build a representation of the data which is adapted, an adaptive representation of the data. But so far, all the theoretical analyses that we can make for these deeper models, they are often limited to a perturbative regime around the initialization. And so they are not able to capture this phenomenon of representation learning, which in contrast is something that we can analyze in this specific case of 2-layer neural networks. So a related argument is that I see two-layer neural networks as the natural next theoretical step after linear model, in the sense that they are slightly more difficult to analyze, but we can still, the analysis is still a bit tractable. And finally, there are beautiful mathematical objects that appear in the analysis, and we will see a few of them: variation norm spaces and Wasserstein gradient flows. All right, so now I will enter the first part of the analysis, which is the global convergence in the infinite width limit of the training dynamics. All right. So the first step will be to replace the parameterization. So you remember we have a lot of weights to parameterize our neural network, but we will replace the finite sum that was defining our predictor by a continuous sum, an integral. And now the parameters will be simply a probability measures on the space of parameters. So this is a natural step because it clears out the invariance by permutation of the parameters that we had in our previous formulation. And a finite width neural networks is recovered by just taking mu as an empirical distribution over the space of probability, over the space of parameters with m atoms. So in turns, this will define a novel, an objective function on the space of probability measures, which is again the loss of our predictor, which is now parameterized by our probability measure mu, plus a potentially a regularization, which now just becomes the second moment of the measure mu. So this objective function f is our new objective, and it takes as a parameter a probability distribution, which parameterizes our neural network. So there are a few small theoretical details that I will gloss over in this presentation to focus on the main message, and in particular, for this to be differentiable in a suitable sense, we need actually to take the expectation of our small perturbations of the input. But there are some small details like that I will not have the time to detail in this talk, and so you can see our papers for all the rigorous statements. So the first thing that this change of point of view can tell us is whether it makes sense or not to talk about training dynamics in infinite width limit. And this is answered by the following theorem. It says that when the width of the neural network goes to plus infinity, then if I see the training dynamics that was the gradient flow with our finite width neural networks that we see now as evolving time-dependent probability distribution, these dynamics will converge as m goes to infinity to some dynamics, which we will call mu-t, in the space of probability distribution. And the convergence is in fact uniform in Wasserstein distance on compact time intervals. So these are small details, but this tells us that there is an object which we obtain in the infinite width limits, which is well defined. And the only condition that we have for that, beyond having a finite second moment for the initialization mu0, is that at initialization, the hidden weights and the output weights should have the same norm for each of the neurons. So this is a small technical condition which allows to solve some non-differentiability issues associated to the ReLU case. And in fact, this dynamic that we obtain in the limit can be characterized as a gradient flow of this objective function f, but by taking a very specific metric in the space of probability distribution, which is the Wasserstein metric. And so this connects our dynamic to a well-established theory of Wasserstein gradient flows, from which we can deduce existence, uniqueness results, and also some stability results. So this is the first step. We have training dynamics, and now we know that it can be well captured, at least when the neural network is large, by some idealized object, which is this Wasserstein gradient flow, mu-t, which captures the behavior of our training dynamics, at least when the neural network is large. And now we will try to understand what can be said about this dynamics mu-t. So the first result that I wanted to talk about is a global convergence result. Assume that at initialization, the hidden weights are uniform on the sphere, and the output weights are uniform or on the set -1, 1. So under this condition on the initialization, we can show that if this limit dynamics mu-t converges to some probability measure, then this limit is a global minimizer of our objective function f. All right, so let me comment a little bit on this result. So first, f is not a convex objective function in the space of probability measures with the geometry that is of interest to us. So it's a non-convex dynamics. It admits some non-optimal stationary points. So we have to have a condition on the initialization to be able to talk about global convergence. And here the condition that we have is that at initialization, we should have enough diversity in the weights. So here I gave a specific example which satisfies our assumptions, but in fact, more general initialization could be considered. For instance, the hidden weights could be Gaussian, and this would be still satisfied. So the key assumption that we need at initialization is diversity of the weights. There is a corollary about this result, is that when m and t go to infinity, we converge to a global minimizer in function value. And here the limit in m and t can be interchanged. And finally, you may have noticed that there is an assumption here that the dynamic converges to some measure mu. In fact, it's an open question to show that it actually converges in the general case. And even when we have compactness, it is a difficult, we do not know how to prove this fact. And there are many interesting open questions related to such dynamics. So what does this result tell us about generalization? What's this predictor that we have learned? How will it generalize? So of course, this will depend on many aspects. In particular, this will depend on the objective f and on the data that we have. So if f is the regularized empirical risk, so with the notation, it means lambda is strictly larger than 0. Then we can say that this becomes just a statistical problem because we have a regularized empirical risk minimization, so which means that we control the complexity of our hypothesis space. And so it becomes just a classical statistical question to answer how good is this predictor for a specific learning task. Now, if we have the unregularized empirical risk, then this result is not enough because there are many ways to minimize the unregularized empirical risk when we have an infinite number of parameters like in our situation. And so we need to understand which minimizer has been selected by gradient descent. And so we need to go back to a final analysis of the dynamics, and this will be the subject of the third part of this talk. And then there is a third situation, which I will just mention, which is when we take as our objective F, the population risk. So which means the expectation of the loss, but on the whole data distribution. Then we only have access, when we have n samples, we only have access to n independent unbiased gradient estimation of this population risk. And so we need to have a convergence speed in order to talk about generalization bounds. And it is an open question to understand the convergence speed of these dynamics in general. So there are, I think, very interesting open questions related to this object, which I will just mention here and there in this talk. All right, so the two next parts of this talk will be these two situations, regularized and unregularized empirical risk. But let me show you a small illustration of this global convergence result. So here it is stochastic gradient descent on the population risk in the case where the labels are generated by a neural network with same architecture, a real neural network, but with only 5 neurons. So we know that we have reached a global minimizer if the parameters of our neural network that we train will be aligned with the neurons of the teacher neural network. And so this is how the dynamics will evolve when we initialize on a small ball around a small sphere around 0. So we see that we have a highly nonlinear dynamics, but in the end, all the neurons align to the ground truth positions, which means that here it will perfectly generalize. So what our results tell is that when we have a lot of particles, an infinite number of particles, in fact, because it's an asymptotic result, we are guaranteed to have such a behavior. However, we do not know, we cannot prove how many particles are needed to actually reach the global minimizer. And all right, so this was a small illustration. And now, in the second part, I want to talk about the generalization properties that we have when we regularize our objective. So this is not a work which is, this is not taken from my own work. This is older results, but I think it's important to understand what are the possibilities, the capabilities of neural networks. And also this will be useful in the third part of the talk, because we will use the concept introduced here to describe the implicit bias of neural networks. So an object which is important in the analysis of neural network is the so-called variation norm. This is a norm on the space of predictors. So I take a function h from RD to R. Its variation norm will be given by the minimum of the second moment over all probability measures, such that h can be written as the two-layer neural networks parameterized with the measure mu. So we see that this is the object that naturally appears given our regularization term. If you know about the variation norm, you might be more familiar with this alternative but equivalent definition, which says that the variation norm, if we see our ReLU function as a continuous dictionary of simple functions, then the variation norm will be the smallest L1 norm over all the possible decomposition of the function h over this continuous dictionary of functions. So they are parameterized by AB, the input weights parameters. And here we have this total variation norm, which is the natural continuous counterpart of the L1 norm regularization. So this variation norm, given its definition, we can easily see that if we have a probability measure mu star which minimizes our objective f with some regularization term, then the associated predictor, so the two-layer neural networks associated to this measure, it will minimize the empirical risk with F1 norm regularization. Remember that this is precisely the predictor that is found when we have a two-layer neural network, a large two-layer neural network trained with gradient descent, because we have shown that we converge to such a global minimizer. So now the question is, what can be said about the generalization properties of such a function? And so to answer this question, we'll just look at a specific setting, which I think illustrates quite well what's happening. So assume that we have inputs which are bounded, and the outputs are given by one Lipschitz functions of the input. So we consider a regression task. We just want to learn a Lipschitz function. And we want to have a small expected L2 error. So we want to find a predictor H with small L2 error in expectation. So without further assumption, in general, this is a difficult problem. It's a classical results. We know that we need at least an exponential number of samples in the dimension. The error that we achieve is in general larger than n to the minus 1 over d. And this is an instance of the curse of dimensionality. So now the question is, if we make additional assumption, what will be our performance? So now what happens if we make the assumption that an anisotropy assumption? We assume that the function f star only depends on the input via a rank R orthogonal projection, where R here can be typically much smaller than D. So in that case, Francis Bach has shown that with a suitable choice of regularization, the minimizer of the F1 norm regularized empirical risk minimization problem with the L2 loss enjoy an error bound in n to the minus 1 over R plus 3. So we see now that the exponential dependency is only in R, which is the intrinsic dimension of the problem, and not on D, which is the ambient dimension. And in contrast, when we want to learn with fixed features, for instance, with kernel methods, we will typically not break the curse of dimensionality in such a setting. So neural networks have this very good adaptivity property. They can learn what are the relevant features to solve a specific learning task. And one thing I'd like to mention is that we do not need to bound the number m of units in this for this result. So in fact, statisticians, it's often believed that when we have too many parameters, statisticians do not know how to prove generalization bounds, but in fact, we just need to change our notion of complexity, and there are many work which works with different notion of complexity than the number of parameters, and here this is the F1 norm that controls the complexity of the model. And also, just for the sake of comparison, I would like to mention what happens when we only train the output layer of the neural network. So in that case, we will only look at probability measures, mu, which have their marginal on the first layer, which is the uniform distribution because this is how it is at initialization. So in practice, when we only train the output layer, it just means commenting out one line of code, which is the one that updates the hidden layer weights. But we'll see that it leads to a very different implicit bias. So we can define this different norm on the space of predictor, which is the minimum L2 norm of the output weights over all possible decomposition of our function given parameterized by our true layer neural network with distribution mu. But now mu is constrained to have uniform distribution on the input weights. And again, we can show that training our true layer neural networks with regularization converges to this mean L2 norm empirical risk solution. So to understand better what are the differences between the F1 and F2 regularization, I will just mention them briefly. So F2, it can be shown that this is a norm of a reproducible kernel Hilbert space. And we have a lot of theory. We understand quite well how to solve regression problem in RKHSs. So for instance, we know that a function with a small F2 norm can be well approximated with random features. We obtain a convex optimization problem, and there are some convex algorithms with performance guarantees, which are known to solve this problem. But in contrast, solving the previous problem with F1 norm regularization is a difficult problem. I do not know a polynomial time algorithm, for instance. And what's fascinating is that this is precisely what training our true layer neural network is doing, although we do not have quantitative computational guarantees for this problem. Now, in terms of statistics, so in terms of the prior that these two norms enforce on the space of predictors, roughly we can understand these two spaces as follows. So the F2 norm will enforce some kind of isotropic smoothness on our predictor. So it will be good at predicting a regression task where the function to learn is smooth in an isotropic way and very smooth in high dimension, while the F1 norm has much more adaptivity. It will be able to learn some functions which are much less smooth, but only depend on some subsets of the parameters. So F1 has more adaptivity, but it is a much more difficult problem to solve. Yeah, so this is essentially the simplified picture of the differences between these two spaces, which correspond to training either both layers or just the output layer of our neural network. So now we'll come to the implicit bias in the case where we do not regularize explicitly the empirical risk. So we have seen that to understand this, we need to go back to a dynamical analysis and understand what is the specific predictor that has been learned by gradient descent. And so we have to go back to a dynamical analysis. So this is the setting we'll consider. We consider a classification task with label -1,1, and the prediction that we will make at test time will be the sign of the neural network. And we consider either the exponential loss or the logistic loss. So logistic loss is given by this, and this is the most commonly used when we solve classification tasks with neural networks. And of course, I recall that we have no regularization in this section. So what's specific with this type of losses is that we see that we can always make the loss smaller by increasing the norm of our predictions. So in fact, here the minimizer will be at infinity. And the question that we'll have is not where does the dynamic converge, but towards which direction will it diverge? And we want to understand this directional convergence. So here I have recalled the result, which is inspiration for our work, but which deals with linear predictors. So it's a result by Soudry and co-authors. It says that if our predictor is W transpose X, so linear predictor, and if I have a linearly separable training set, then whatever the initialization, the gradient flow will diverge to infinity because of the reason I've just told before. But when we normalize the gradient flow, so we take its normalization on the sphere, it will converge to L2 max margin classifier, which means that among all the classifiers that perfectly classify our training set, this will be the one with the largest confidence if we have this L2 norm constraint over those with L2 norm smaller than 1. All right, so this was the result that was known in the linearly separable case. And we have an analogous result for the case of two-layer volume neural networks. So now we come back to our Wasserstein gradient flow, the dynamics of our infinitely wide two-layer neural networks. We have the same assumption on the initialization, that the hidden weights are uniform on the sphere and the output weights on -1, 1. And now the assumption on the training set is much smaller. We just need that when we have twice the same input, we have the same output. And why we only need this assumption is because we can approximate any continuous function with a two-layer neural network, so we do not need a strong separability assumption. We have some spurious assumptions that the dynamics converge and also the gradient. So as in the previous result, this is some open questions to remove these assumptions. But if we make those assumptions, then we can show that the predictor that is learned by the neural network, at least during the training dynamics, the normalized predictor will converge to a F1 max margin classifier, which means that over all predictors with F1 norm smaller than 1, it should be the one with the largest confidence in its prediction. What's interesting here is that there is no efficient algorithm that is known to solve this problem, but again, that's something that our two-layer ReLU neural network is doing. And we can show an analogous result for the case when we only train the output layer, so we fix the hidden layer, and in that case, applying the previous results for linear classifiers, we could show that we can show that it converges to the F2 max margin classifier. So we have the same picture in terms of implicit bias, that when we train both layers, we converge to a F1 max margin classifier, and when we train only the output layer, we converge to a F2 max margin classifier. So is this classifier useful in terms of generalization for classification tasks? It turns out, also before answering these questions, I just want to show a quick illustration. So here, this is the dynamics in predictor space, either when we train just the output layer, and here when we train the both layers. Here, this will converge to a F2 max margin classifier. So we call that it learns smooth functions, while this F1 max margin classifier learns more structure about the data. So this is what we obtain when we train our two-layer ReLU neural networks for the logistic loss. All right, so I just wanted, so maybe I have time to just talk briefly about the generalization properties of this F1 max margin classifier. So again, we will consider specific learning setup to provide some generalization bounds. So we consider inputs that are bounded by R, and we assume that there exists some rank R such that the largest interclass distance after a projection of rank R is larger than delta of R. So in brief, this means that there is some low dimensional structure in our classification task, and the quantity R divided by delta of R will quantify how hard is our problem, and the larger it will be, the harder is our problem. So under such assumption, separability assumption between our data, we can show that the F1 max margin classifier will have a proportion of mistakes which decreases as 1 over square root of n, so this is a classical rate, multiplied by this difficulty of the problem to the power R over 2. And what's important here is that we have an exponential dependency, but only in R, which is the intrinsic dimension of the problem, and not on D, which is the actual ambient dimension. So for this bound, this is what is to be noticed. And for learning in F2, we can show the same bound, but only in the case where R equals to D. So we have to pay the exponential price, although I do not specific setting yet. And a small last comment is that such classification tasks where the two classes are well separated, they are asymptotically easy. It means that in the end, the rate n to the -1 over 2 is suboptimal. However, here, this is a strong non-asymptotic bound. It tells that we do not need an exponential of samples before reaching a suitable, good generalization performance. And here, this is a small illustration in a specific numerical experiment. We consider a classification task in dimension 15, where the two first coordinates are distributed as follows. So we see that we have two well-separated classes. but all the 13 other coordinates, they will be random noise. So this is specifically the setting that were of interest in the previous theorem. And this is the test error after training our two-layer neural networks in blue, and in orange after training only the output layer. So this is the F1 max margin, and here the F2 max margin classifier. We see that with 500 samples, we already have almost a perfect generalization bound, perfect generalization test error with our by training both layers, which is incomparably better than just training the output layer. All right. And here, this is the last, another illustration which shows the F1 margin as the number of neurons increases during our training dynamics. So here, for instance, with by training a neural network with 100 neurons, we almost achieve already the F1 margin. So although our results only guarantee that this black curve converges eventually to the F1 max margin, we observe that it's already at play with a small, reasonably small number of neurons. And these are open questions to quantify these results. So I think I do not really have time. I guess I should switch to the question session right now, or maybe I have 2 slides more.
Maybe 1 or 2 minutes is fine, yeah.
Okay, so I will present a last phenomenon associated to the training dynamics of two-layer ReLU neural networks, which I find quite amusing. So there is a series of a lot of work which have been concerned with the following phenomenon, which I will introduce very informally to go fast, which we call the lazy training phenomenon. So it says that if everything else is equal, if we increase the variance at initialization of our neural networks, and if we decrease the step size, then the model will behave like the first order expansion, its first order expansion in the parameters over a significant time during the training dynamics. And the largest the variance, the longer it will behave like this first order expansion. So this is an informal presentation of this lazy training phenomenon. And to understand what's happening, it means that each neuron will will hardly move, but together they will produce a significant change in the space of predictor. And here, when we learn the first order expansion of the model, this will mean that we learn, sorry, in the specific case of the losses with exponential tail, like the logistic loss, we can show that this linearized model will converge to a max margin classifier for the tangent RKHS. So it will solve a problem which is similar to the F2 max margin classification. But our result about the implicit bias still applies. So we still know that in the end, the dynamics will converge to a F1 max margin classifier. So we expect that at first, if we have a large variance at initialization, we will first solve some RKHS kernel kernel SVM problem, a kernel max margin problem. But then in the long term, in the long time range, we'll converge to F1 max margin problem. And in fact, this is something that we observe. So here is an illustration of this phenomenon. So we see that in the early stage of the dynamics, here I have increased the variance. So that's why we have a large ball. The parameters hardly move, but still we completely learn the predictor, which is smooth and perfectly classifies the data. So this is the max margin classifier in the tangent RKHS. And then if we let the dynamics evolve on a longer time, then the theorem that I have presented applies. And we observe this sparsity inducing effect of the total variation norm, and we converge to this F1 max margin classifier. So here, this is just a two-layer ReLU neural networks trained with gradient descent, and we see that we have a rich family of implicit bias that appear. First, some F2 max margin, and then the F1 max margin in the long term. So I will conclude my talk here. I recall that our goal was to provide generalization guarantees for neural networks trained with gradient method, and the analysis was via analysis of Wasserstein gradient flow. And the homogeneity property of the ReLU activation was crucial in our analysis. And open questions are, of course, to give a proof of convergence, the open questions I've mentioned, and also to have more quantitative results, and to study more complex architectures. So there is a blog post I've recently wrote on Francis Bach's blog, which covers similar topics as this talk in slightly more detail. So if you're interested and if you want to see more videos, you can check this blog post. Otherwise, the published articles are these ones. Thank you for your attention.